Welcome to This Explainer. Back in 2021, the whole world basically stopped and watched a story unfold that, at first glance, looked like an absolute dream. We're talking about a young couple, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, who packed up their white Ford Transit van and set off on this grand cross-country adventure. If you were strolling through their feeds, it looked like the ultimate romantic getaway, right? A carefree road trip that they were super eager to document for YouTube. But, as we all tragically know now, behind those beautiful filters and smiling selfies, something profoundly dark was actually unfolding. Millions of us were glued to our screens, watching this picture-perfect #van life dream play out. The sun-drenched photos from national parks, the cozy van setups, the seemingly flawless relationship. It was incredibly captivating. But the audience was totally unaware of the tragedy that was quite literally about to strike. Those carefully curated posts, they were masking a reality that was rapidly deteriorating behind closed doors, or, well, closed van doors. Today, we're going to break down the source material to understand exactly how this deeply public tragedy escalated, step by step, right in front of our eyes. It's honestly jarring when you look at it. You have this stark contrast between the romantic YouTube road trip, the picturesque, carefree life they deliberately presented to the world, and then you slam that right up against the chilling reality of what actually went down in Moab, Utah. The juxtaposition is just shocking. It really shows us how easily curated online lives can completely mask real-world turmoil, bringing us right to the very first major warning sign that shattered their perfect image. All right, let's dive into Section 1. The Moab Incident, a critical intervention. So early on in August, a really concerned witness actually calls the cops after seeing a physical altercation between Gabby and Brian. The officers show up in Moab and they have to assess this deeply emotional, frankly chaotic situation. Ultimately, what happens is the couple gets separated by the officers for the night. Gabby keeps the van and Brian is taken to a hotel just to cool down. But here is the crucial detail. No arrests were made. The officers kind of treated it more like a mental health crisis or a stress-induced breakdown rather than a domestic assault. And obviously that is a decision that has been heavily scrutinized ever since. Now, you literally cannot overstate how important that police body cam footage turned out to be. At the time, to those officers, it probably just seemed like a resolved dispute, Just a really stressful moment for a couple stuck in close quarters on a long trip. But looking back in hindsight, it carried massive weight. That footage served as this desperate, documented look right into their unraveling dynamic just weeks before Gabby vanished. Which brings us to Section 2, Disappearance and the Hunt. The timeline escalates. To really wrap our heads around where Gabby's mindset was at right before her disappearance, we have to look at this fairly recent, really poignant quote. Gabby's ex-boyfriend stated, "Gabby had grown afraid of Laundrie and wanted to separate from him." I mean, wow, that changes the narrative entirely, doesn't it? She wasn't just experiencing travel fatigue, she was afraid. The tension was hitting a boiling point, and she was actively looking for a way out of that relationship right before she vanished. Let's map out exactly how this escalated chronologically. The trip starts off as this romantic cross-country journey full of hope and content creation. But by mid-trip, the pressure's cooking, leading directly to that physical altercation and police intervention in Moab that we just talked about. Then, in the final days of August, all communication completely stops. Gabby suddenly disappears. And then we hit the most chilling milestone of the entire timeline. Brian returns to his parents' home in Florida, alone, driving Gabby's van, and he doesn't offer a single word of explanation to her frantic family. Brian returns alone, and because he and his family immediately invoked their right to remain silent, providing absolutely zero explanation for Gabby's absence, well, an unprecedented internet manhunt kicks off. The true crime community, TikTokers, YouTubers, everyday citizens, everyone mobilized like never before. It was like the internet suddenly morphed into this massive, collective detective agency. People were dissecting every single frame of their old YouTube videos, tracking their digital footprint, and piecing together van sightings in Wyoming, just completely desperate to find out where Gabby was left behind. Moving on to Section 3, Discovery and Aftermath, Tragic Resolutions. The final resolutions of this case unfolded so rapidly and across totally different corners of the country. First, that hopeful search came to a tragic end when Gabby's remains were found in the remote wilderness of Wyoming, right near where those internet sleuths had actually spotted their van on video. Second, as the investigative walls really started closing in, Brian Laundrie fled his family home, disappearing into the vast, unforgiving Carlton Reserve in Florida. Third, his disappearance triggers this massive, highly publicized nationwide manhunt, shifting the entire focus from Wyoming down to the harsh Florida terrain. And finally, The search concluded when Bryant's remains were discovered. He had died by suicide inside that reserve. We also have to confront the absolutely devastating autopsy results out of Wyoming, which revealed the actual cause of Gabby's death: blunt force trauma and strangulation. This is the stark, brutal reality of the violence Gabby faced at the very end of her life. It completely strips away all of those romanticized van life aesthetics and forces us to look squarely at the horrifying facts. It was a brutal, incredibly intimate act of violence. Which leads us to our final part today, Section 4, the legacy, recognizing the red flags. Look, we can't just consume this explainer as some sort of true crime spectacle, right? We really have to draw a deeply empathetic lesson here about domestic violence awareness. Domestic violence red flags are typically defined as early warning signs of abuse, escalating controlling behavior, or fear within a relationship. When we look back at the entire chronological timeline we just covered, the Moab incident, the clear distress in that body cam footage, the sheer isolation of the road trip, and that heartbreaking revelation that Gabby had grown genuinely afraid of Brian, we see these red flags, and they are glaringly obvious in hindsight. The enduring legacy of Gabby Petito's story is tied directly to these warning signs and our collective ability to spot them before it's too late. So this leaves us with a really tough but absolutely vital question to reflect on. How can we better recognize the early red flags of domestic violence in our own communities to prevent future tragedies? Because at the end of the day, this explainer isn't just about understanding what went wrong on a tragic road trip. It's about asking ourselves how we can be more vigilant for the people around us. Thank you so much for joining me today. Take this question with you, keep your eyes open, and please stay safe out there.